Hello and welcome back to the Canadian Retirement Roadmap podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Briscoe. In our last episode, The Executor Dilemma, when family isn't the best fit, we explored some of the challenges families face when choosing the right executor, and why in some cases, looking outside of family can lead to better outcomes. If you haven't yet listened to that episode, I highly recommend going back to it as a lead-in to today's conversation, because today's episode is the perfect follow-up. I'm joined today by Devon Miller, the Director of Partnerships at Clear Estate, a company that's reimagining the estate planning and settlement experience. Whether you're looking to get your own affairs in order, or you're an executor currently navigating an estate, Clear Estate provides tools, guidance, and hands-on support every step of the way. We'll talk about what Clear Estate actually does, why they're partnered with Investment Planning Council, and how their service can save time, reduce stress, and simplify what is often a very emotional and overwhelming process. I'll also be sharing my own recent decision to update my will to name a professional executor, why I made that change, and how it reflects the values I want to pass on to my family. You'll also find a helpful estate planning checklist from Clear Estate, along with our own Choosing the Right Executor guide, which is linked on our podcast page at bayswaterwealth.ca/podcast. Now, let's dive into the conversation with Devin. Devin, thank you for joining the Canadian Retirement Roadmap podcast. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Pat.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great to have you. Why don't we start by jumping right in, get a little bit of a background. Can you give us a high-level overview of what Clear Estate is and how the company came to be?
Yeah, so Clear Estate is really designed to be a place where anyone can come for all of their estate planning or estate administration needs. How Clear Estate really came to be was actually through the life experiences of one of our co-founders. He lost his father at a very young age, and thereafter lost his mother at still a fairly young age as well. And through that process of trying to settle her estate, found it to be a very, difficult process in addition to the emotion, just also administratively of figuring out how to get things done as a young student. And somewhat frustrated with the process and not willing to accept that that's just the way it is, Clear Estate kind of became born as a way to really improve the process for executors and their families.
And it happens more often than we think. I know I have clients who unfortunately lost both parents at a young age, and getting them up to speed and thankfully having a family member that was able to be their trustee and help them until they were adults was key. But for families who might not have that, having a tool like Clear Estate might be a saving grace. And we can get into that. This is actually kind of a nice jumping off point, a great opportunity to kind of distinguish between what estate planning is and what estate settlement is. Because while they're closely related, they involve very different steps and timing. So estate planning, it's the process of getting your affairs in order before passing away. And those are things like creating a will, naming powers of attorney, choosing an executor, and outlining your wishes. And then estate settlement, on the other hand, begins after somebody passes away. And that's when the planning instructions that were created during the planning phase start to get carried out. And so that's gathering assets, paying debts, navigating probate, filing tax returns, and then distributing the assets of the estate. So both stages are critical, but they require a very different type of support. So maybe, Devin, we can start with the planning side first. Could you kind of walk us through what Clear Estate offers to clients in the estate planning stage?
So a big part of what we want to do is, make it easy to get a plan in place and get a quality plan in place. And in doing so, we aim to do that to ensure that the client's estate plan is coordinated with the financial plan from their advisor. So, many people will want to start the discussion with, okay, what should I have, in my will? And really, we don't want to start there because we want to know about your family, about your goals, about what your assets and liabilities are to understand the landscape of the situation before we get to those things. And understanding the lay of the land and what someone envisions for the future, that's really the lead in to actually making sure you have an effective will and power of attorney and trust planning, etc., if necessary, based on what you want to happen and what your unique situation looks like.
So, what are some of the tools that Clear Estate offers? So, can somebody actually do a will through Clear Estate, create those POAs, and outline that plan? And kind of what does that look like if someone comes to Clear Estate?
Yes, absolutely. So, in working to both helping craft the plan with the client and their advisor, we also help implement it as well. So we provide wills, power of attorney for property documents, power of attorney for personal care or representation agreement, depending on your jurisdiction within Canada. We're able to assist with testamentary trust planning. We also offer professional executor and trusteeship. So for those that want to unload that future settlement obligation from their family members or a friend, we can pre-plan for that as well.
Perfect. Perfect lead into when somebody passes away. So now the family enters that estate settlement stage. Now let's assume that either through Clear Estate or a lawyer or doing it themselves, someone has created a will, powers of attorney, they've passed away. What key services now does Clear Estate provide or can provide to help the family through that settlement process?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we want everyone to have the best planning possible, but the reality is it doesn't happen in every case. But even when it is well planned, I think a thing to remember is very few people's own executor out there is an experienced legal professional or an accountant, let alone both. And so, in those cases, Clear Estate Settlement Services can help that executor and the family through all steps of administration. There are many we hear about like probate and taxes, which we do support. We support the probate process, the terminal T1 of who's passed away, the T3 for the estate return, a clearance certificate from CRA, all of those things, but also supporting a number of things that many aren't aware of that they may need to do. Creating an inventory of assets and liabilities, notifications to government entities and credit bureaus for identity protection. If there's real property involved, getting the necessary insurance coverages for it being vacant and the proper appraisals. So many of the other mechanisms that go actually into settling an estate, we support the executor and the family from end to end here at Clear Estate, as opposed to having to direct them to other places to get support.
And that's kind of one of the big features of Clear Estate that stood out to me because I have watched families go through the settlement process and they use a lawyer perhaps for probate, an accountant to do the taxes. There is a final tax return and an estate tax return in some cases. And the communication and cost to have these things done with various individuals or institutions quickly adds up. So having one entity do that can create some efficiencies. What has Clear Estate seen as some of the potential efficiencies, benefits, cost savings as a result of having everything in one place?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the greatest things that we see is limited commodity time. Just physically having to go to different places to go see that lawyer and then see a different accountant and then drive to the bank yourself and then go to another institution and all of these places that an executor may need to physically be. Being able to work with a single source at Clear Estate to handle those tasks for you. And in a remote virtual capacity as well, can really allow someone to get this done without the travel, but also from the comfort of their home, their office. Beyond the raw implication of time, there are simple things of, who's going to watch the kids while I do this, or how am I going to get this done, but make it to soccer practice by 6? I think, people will often forget they view their executor as a very trusted, competent person that they want to handle this. But the executor's life itself does not stop when they take on this other role, and you're not there to help them.
Yeah, 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 very valid. And this is actually one of the reasons that I've recently changed my will to name a professional executor. And we can get a little bit more into that when we chat a little bit about choosing the executor and who that person should be. But just still touching on the efficiency aspect, any numbers that come to mind in terms of time saving, how long an estate typically takes to settle, just to give listeners an idea of if I'm an executor, what can I expect from a timeline and workload perspective?
Yeah, I mean, estate settlements can take up to 18 to 24 months. And part of the difficulties of it is that not everything happens at once. You cannot just decide as an executor that this week I am going to settle the estate. You need to get someone to appraise that home. It needs to go to market. Someone needs to buy it. The house has to close. We have to liquidate the investments. And even, perhaps once you think you've got everything sold and into an estate account, well, you still have to wait till next year to file the tax returns and get the clearance certificate and things like that. And well, you can't make distributions to beneficiaries until you're sure of the tax obligations. So, it really becomes a start, stop scenario for that executor of how long it's really going to take, which can be frustrating because you lose some control of that process.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. Just speaking from personal experience with clients, if somebody passes away in June or July, there's an eagerness to get everything settled and done. However, usually you're waiting until the following tax season just to do the final tax return. So it can be a painstaking process and nice to be able to offload that to somebody else.
Yeah, like a very concrete example was a gentleman I worked with a couple of years ago. He attempted to file for probate on his own, and the first time he forgot to include the original will. He sent a copy in, which was not allowed, so they instantly rejected his submission. And by instantly, I mean, he got it back without further review. It took about 6 months for it to get to the top of the pile before they said no.
Yeah.
And so, having resubmitted with the original will, then they actually took time to review his application, at which point they rejected it again for, another number of errors on the form. And what made me remember this scenario for this gentleman was his sister, which was a beneficiary of the estate, was obviously wondering, when are things going to happen? Why is this taking so long? But really, what led him to come to us was his sister was actually very kind, but she said, when this is done, this will let me retire. The only reason I'm at work right now is because you haven't finished this. So please go get some help.
Wow.
And that's what really took him to us to do so. So,
Yeah, yeah, and it's important because really an executor should be waiting until they get a clearance certificate from CRA to do most of the distributions of assets. And that comes, if you're lucky, 6 months after all of the other work is complete. So,
and
yeah,
we were a year in with no progress.
yeah, I think you're right to hit that 18 to 24 month period. That means you're organized and you're starting from day one to hopefully meet that timeline, just to set realistic expectations. We know it's a lot of work. We know there's competencies involved. Let's talk a little bit about choosing the right executor. So, in my previous episode, I talked about how emotional and stressful this estate process can be, especially if it's a family member that's acting as executor, not to mention a family member with siblings or other loved ones that are waiting on them, to your point, to get the job done, asking why things are being delayed, questioning some of the actions that are being done. So it's like I said, one of the reasons I'm updating my will. I have 4 children and a wife, and my hope is that I live a long time and down the road, my 4 kids won't have to go through that process of who's making those decisions. Are their siblings thinking that those decisions are made in the best or most accurate way? I would rather give that job slash burden to somebody else. So, can you talk about why someone might want to choose using a professional executor instead of a friend or relative? And maybe in what cases a friend or relative might be a good option?
One thing I would say is engaging a professional executor is not a slight to whomever individual personally that you would otherwise choose.
It's a
I would
gift.
say you have a financial advisor. When your lights go out, you will call an electrician. If the water stops, you will very likely call a plumber. And utilizing those professional expertise to handle your estate administration is no different than anything else you've done in your life when you seek out professional guidance. In doing so, one of my favorite examples when I run client facing seminars is there's an individual called Johnny Kim. And if you look up Johnny, Johnny is a Navy SEAL. He has an MD from Harvard, and he is also an astronaut. He is also somehow married with 3 kids amongst all that.
Yeah.
So,
I've seen his Instagram and I sometimes wonder how it's possible.
yes. So nobody is questioning Johnny's intelligence or decision-making ability or how he's going to work under pressure. That's fine. But this man clearly has a lot to do besides be an executor for 18 to 24 months, let alone if he is not in outer space potentially, he would very likely want to be with his family, right? So, you know, as things become more complex, and what you can do as far as administration and tax strategy, that professional help just more so shines and shows its abilities of what you can do for families. What I would say is even those out there that consider themselves to have a simple estate, which most people do until you open up the hood, that doesn't mean there aren't things that a professional can do to make it better and to optimize it for people. For those of you, engaging a personal executor, things I would say is, consider someone not so much based on their level to do it independently, but actually their level of knowledge of themselves, of when they should engage professional help to seek a lawyer, an outside agency, or an accountant. Think of their ability to make decisions calmly and rationally without too much, outside or undue influence, and also consider geography very, very much, because of the logistics involved of what you're doing in the administration, but also some legal requirements. Executors that live outside of province are allowed if they are named in the will, but can be very often subject to a surety bond. And the premium for that bond can be very, very expensive, which can have a big detriment to the overall net estate.
And it's a good plug to head over to bayswaterwealth.ca/podcast because we created a checklist/guide on choosing the right executor. So some of what we just talked about is in there. So head over there and have a look to download. So Devin, given that information, any real world examples that stick out in your mind in terms of clients or situations Clear Estate has faced to help families through the estate settlement process?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say to start with is most of the examples are very uninteresting. They are normal people and normal families that just don't want their kids to have to deal with it or don't want their spouse to have to
Yeah.
deal with it. The majority of people we work with do not have an outlandish scenario. But some very unique instances. Yes, we currently serve as a power of attorney for an individual on the West Coast whose children, live out of country, and it would not be possible for them to support their parent in that regard. We've also had the instance of clients, with medically assisted passing that they have actually scheduled, and they know they will be passing away in a certain time, and prearranging their own funeral and family coming together, but also their administration. So to meet a client and say, is there anything relevant or coming up that we need to be aware of? And they say, yes, I'm dying on the 27th, kind of takes you aback the first time you hear that.
Yeah. But I mean, you think about that unfortunate situation, but also how much less effort it would be on the family so that they can spend the time with each other during that difficult time, knowing that, okay, I don't have to wake up tomorrow and start with these executor duties, right? So, I mean, that is probably the number one reason why I chose not to name family as my executor. The thought of me being gone and my wife, Rita, and my kids now having to pick everything up and figure out how to settle my estate is just something that I want to be able to sleep at night knowing they don't have to do that.
Yeah, and that's really, something that comes away. I mean, in many households, people contribute in different ways based on their skill sets and things they want to do in it. And something when we're pre-planning with clients and getting things in order is, regardless of who is the person that somewhat takes the lead or things on financial initiatives, the person who doesn't, we find two things. One, they always come away with a much, much greater level of clarity on what their own situation looks like, financially and from a succession standpoint. but two, they come away with much, much more confidence that having gone through that exercise and knowing it's planned out, that even if something were to happen to that partner, they know now that things will be okay.
And that's worth a lot. So, on the topic of clarity, so jumping into some of the practical parts of clear estate. So, I know that clear estate has kind of turned the estate settlement process on its head when compared to the traditional way of doing it. How has Clear Estate combined technology in terms of dashboards, portals, checklists, organization so that estate planning and then settlement is clear?
Yeah, I would say we were not entirely clairvoyant in this. So, I mean, the initial dream was, can you make TurboTax for estate planning administration? And it was very
That's a good
quickly
way to put
determined
it.
that the answer was no, you cannot. There's a lot of complexity involved, but there's also a very human element to both planning that up front and working with families in an administrative standpoint. But that I think combining the technology with the human element has really, really made it, the success that it is in something that really hasn't seen a lot of innovation for a long time. In doing so, we're able to work with subject matter expertise all across the country to support people regardless of location. So, we can have a tax expert in Northern Ontario supporting someone in Manitoba and other locations. So, to really have that accessibility for both advisors and individuals to find what they need regardless of location is really, really relevant. It also is a way to bring people together for alignment on plans. Again, we don't want the financial plan and the estate plan to be disagreeing with each other. The knowledge of, what has a beneficiary designation, what accounts are held jointly versus independently is very, very relevant to ensure the success of the plan. And the service model we built to do that collaboratively makes sure it happens.
Yeah, yeah. What I really like too is, you have a login, you can see a breakdown of your assets, who the beneficiaries are, what may be taxed and pass through the estate or pass outside of the estate. And maybe we'll try and get some screenshots if Clear Estate is okay with it and put it on the podcast here so people can have a look and see what that looks like. Now, it sounds great, right? Smooth. Sounds like a good opportunity for some estate planning and settlement planning. IPC, Investment Planning Council, our firm has partnered with Clear Estate. How does that referral process work, and how does that benefit clients?
Yeah, so advisors at IPC have a dedicated platform to Clear Estate to be able to schedule free consultations for clients about their estate planning or settlement needs. So right away, I think removing that barrier to entry of who or how do I speak to someone, goes a long way. And during that consultation process, really a few things we want to do. One, introduce the client to Clear Estate and estate planning. Two, learn a little bit about their situation factually, their family dynamics, their asset structure, and three, their goals. What do they really want to make sure would happen in the future for them? And conversely, what do they want to make sure never happens, in their future estate for their family? And based on that, we'll be able to outline some strategies that might be applicable, show them Clear Estate service offering and what level of which might align to that, and let them know what it would cost. And that's really something that's been innovative in this industry. Conventionally, these things are $400 or $500 an hour until they're done. And a lack of cost transparency in anything is a recipe for it not happening. I'm definitely not about to sign up to something that I have no idea what it might cost in the end, or if I do, I'm extremely reluctant to do so. With Clear Estate being only involved in estate planning and administration as our business, being able to essentially menu price a number of things of what your estate plan will cost, even when taking into account complexities like secondary corporate wills or testamentary trust planning or other jurisdictions, really gives client clarity into, this is what we're going to do. this is how we'll do it, and this is what it's going to cost. And it really gives them and their advisor transparency into having the information they want to make a good decision.
Yeah, and as a financial planner, it's a very useful tool. I mean, we've made a big push to try and get copies of client wills and powers of attorney just so that we can help clarify what those things actually mean and what the instructions in those documents actually say. And Clear Estate is kind of the next level up. Okay, if you don't have it yet, here's an option to do it. And even if you do have it, here's a way that we can plan out and make sure that those things are carried out the way that you want them to be. And on a transparency note, although there is a referral relationship, there is no compensation to the advisor from Clear Estate. So just want to put that out there as well so that, and that's kind of to get rid of a potential conflict of interest. So just a heads up to anybody who's listening and was wondering
Absolutely.
about that.
Yeah, we want to work with you because you think it's what's best for them. And I mean, additional things that it offers, not just having access to digital copies of the will and power of attorney, but access to asset and liability information and where accounts are held and what the succession plan will look like. Something that an executor used to be able to do was wait by the mailbox and eventually account statements would show up. That is
Good
not the
point.
case anymore. Many of us are receiving statements and bills online. We have more accounts than we have fingers and toes to count them on. There is a high probability that without a good plan, an executor is going to miss both assets to deal with and accounts to close off. And this is a way that the planner and their advisor gets full visibility to everything there to make sure nothing is missed.
Yes, and that does happen. I have seen estates get the clearance certificate only to see 6 or 12 months later one more T slip come in that they didn't know existed. And we have to reopen the whole estate, redo a tax return, reapply for clearance. So pre-planning can be very, very important. Last topic I think that we'll touch on here regarding trust, quality, and concerns. Clear Estate is a online virtual based company that sometimes triggers some questions from clients. And estate planning and settlement is definitely a sensitive matter. So the thought of having a will and private documents online can be nerve wracking for some. How does Clear Estate ensure confidentiality, professional standards, and accuracy to put clients' nerves at ease?
Yeah, absolutely. So Clear Estate is what you call SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, which includes a number of data security measures. It also includes periodic penetration testing, where our team and external teams actually try to break into Clear Estate and make sure to secure in that manner. Beyond the digital component to it as well, physical storage of documents for clients that have professional executor services, they are actually kept on site at a vault at our head office. So we have that level as well there. Two-factor authentication is also part of making sure client access is secure. And even within households, individuals have their own platform. So as much as things may be shared in a household and lots of people have joint finances or plans, not everybody does. So every individual has their own vault and their own platform for their information only.
What are some of the common client concerns or questions that you hear? How are those typically addressed? Can you think of maybe 2 or 3 things that commonly come up?
Yeah, one thing that comes up is, what are my kids going to think? Because that is the kind of de facto, choice of an executor for a parent in a lot of cases. And it wasn't me. It was another advisor I met that came up with this. He said that, if you ask your kids to do anything, they'll say yes. You've done so much for them over the years. They'll always say yes. So
And I hope so.
he says, if you change the way you ask the question and say, look, I'm doing some planning. Nothing is wrong. Stay calm. I'm okay. But I'm doing some planning. And I'm looking to engage a professional service that would see you inherit 99% of my estate without having to do anything. Would that be okay? They will jump on that.
Yes,
So, that's
just the way
always
to
a
put
big
it.
one of, what is my family going to think? What's their opinion going to be on that? Because you're not around to, justify your actions per se after the fact. So, the perception of what's my legacy going to be is always a top of mind thing. From advisors, I guess I would say actually a big question is, how will my clients of an older demographic interact with a service like this?
Yes.
And I would say, we built Clear Estate with that in mind, of those that have planning as a bigger priority. And that's also a reason why, we integrate the advisor into the process, both for your own visibility. So you get the comfort in what the interaction is like, what the plan is, what's being said, but also so you're there and available to support a client, if so, to help them, hop onto a Teams call, to upload that statement. We make sure they've got the support they need at every step.
Yep. And that is very helpful. Yeah, and we've got access to that portal and have helped clients navigate, upload documents, and walk through the process. Devin, as we wrap up, can you leave our listeners with one key message about estate planning? And if you could, what would that be?
You're never going to plan because it's urgent. You plan because it's important.
Great advice. So I would recommend that you get started today. And for anybody interested in working with Clear Estate through IPC, or if you have questions, Devin, what would be their first step if that were the case?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, reach out to Pat at Bayswater's there. Say I'm looking to have the conversation, and he can definitely provide any information about Clear Estate, or arrange for that free consultation. And someone on our team would be happy to open the discussion and learn a bit about each other and see how we can support. Right, and
Wonderful.
Just on your own, if you want to go to clearestate.com, by all means, take a look around.
Perfect. Love that answer. Thank you so much, Devin. Really appreciate your time today, giving us a little bit of information about Clear Estate and its offerings. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out. And Devin, I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks for joining me today for this conversation with Devon Miller from Clear Estate. If there's one takeaway from this discussion, it's that reviewing or even just starting your estate plan is one of the most meaningful steps you can take to protect your family and your legacy. That includes choosing an executor who is not only trustworthy, but also equipped to manage what can be a complex and emotional process. For some, that might mean a family member or a friend. And for others, especially in blended families or where there's a potential for conflict, professional support can be the better choice. Companies like Clear Estate can offer valuable guidance, whether you need help organizing your documents, navigating probate, or fully administering the estate from start to finish. If you'd like to explore more options or have questions about how this might fit into your personal plan, feel free to reach out to me directly. And of course, don't forget to visit bayswaterwealth.ca/podcast to download 2 great resources that we've uploaded there for you. The first is our Choosing the Right Executor Guide, and the second is Clear Estate's Estate Planning Checklist. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. I appreciate you joining me today, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Trademarks owned by Investment Planning Counsel Incorporated and licensed to its subsidiary corporations. Investment Planning Counsel is a fully integrated wealth management company. Mutual funds available through IPC Investment Corporation and IPC Securities Corporation. Securities available through IPC Securities Corporation, a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Insurance products available through Patrick Briscoe. Independent of his role with IPCIC, Patrick Briscoe is also a co-author in the forthcoming books entitled Financial Success for Pre-Retirees and Financial Success for Retirees, due out in early 2025.